All right, we are recording. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? Very quickly, we're just going to go through the minutes from the last meeting and hopefully approve those. Then Michael's going to give us a progress checkpoint, just remind us where we are. Then we have two main things to get through today, the obligations and the REST interactions. Now, I'm not actually sure who's presenting those, so I'm hoping that somebody will pop their hand up.
It'll be me, Brett.
Awesome, thanks, Brett.
Cool.
And then Michael's going to come back, talk to us a bit about the proposal for the AU eRequesting DI mappings to eRequesting, and then we'll finish up. All right. So I'm afraid we did not send out the meeting minutes, and that's my fault. I went in before the meeting and checked my inbox, and I hadn't sent the notification. So these are the minutes from last week. You can find them in the eRequesting Confluence, or alternatively, you can follow this link, confluence.hl7.org/x/bgzfdw. But these are the meeting minutes. The slides are in there, the list of attendees is in there, and all the decisions that we made relating to obligations are in there. And they should be as recorded during the meeting. Would anybody like to motion to approve those?
I'll move it, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. And is there a second?
I'm happy to second, Joe.
Thank you very much. Right. Should have a poll up on your screen right now for the meetings of the previous, the minutes of the previous meeting. Right, and I'm going to close that off in 3, 2, 1. I can't share it for some reason. Zoom's being difficult. It was passed affirmative 22, abstained 16. Affirmative 22, abstained 16. All right, Michael, I'll hand over to you.
Yep, I'm just going to give a bit of a progress checkpoint about where we're at. So jump to the next slide. So this is our waves of decision making. So you can see there we've been through wave 1, which is the cardinality must support. We've been through the wave 2, the terminology, data types, and constraints. We went through wave 3, system actors, and last week we were working through wave 4, which is system obligations. We've done the placer obligations, the filler obligations. I think we've got a couple of elements that we missed on those, so we'll just come back and revisit those 2 elements we missed today. And then we have to go through server obligations, patient access obligations, and RESTful interactions as well. So we need to try and get through all of that today, so that then in our last meeting next week, before we publish the ballot for comment snapshot, we want to do a full walkthrough of the IG to show everything that's been incorporated to date, and address any unresolved issues that need addressing before we take that snapshot, and do some planning for what's next. I'll just put in the chat, I'm not sure, maybe Chris, you can just navigate to this rather than me share my screen, but just to show where we're at with the IG changes. You'll notice now in this current version of the IG, we've now got a generic service request as well as an imaging service request and pathology request. So those were broken out in response to the decisions we made around the code. And if you just maybe click on imaging request there and scroll down, you'll see in here that we've got the bindings. We don't have the value set in the IG yet, but we've got a binding there to imaging procedure. And maybe if you just click on the AU request service request, I'll just click back, click back. And then the generic one on the top, you'll see down here all of the obligations that we've made decisions about to date. So have a browse through there. We'll go through, I think, a full walkthrough of the IG next week, but all the changes to date are in there. So it's worth having a look to see where we've got to and what's in there. I think that's my update for where we're at.
Great. Thanks, Michael. That's fantastic. All right, I'm going to hand over to Brett for system obligations.
Cool. Cool. So we might just get straight into it. So we're continuing on our discussion. So just as a reminder, we had these actors in place that we had discussed previously. So we're continuing to talk about specific obligations on the elements that we've already defined as must support. So I might just go on to the next slide. Thanks, Chris. So this, we did miss body site in our list of placer and filler obligations. So this is to cover off that that element. So this body site was an optional must support element. So the initial proposal was to, for the placer actor, this is an optional element. So along with the other optional elements that we've talked about previously, the intent would be to make this populate if known, so that lets systems that have support for body site, if they do have support for body site, they should, they must populate that element. So if you explicitly support body site, there's an expectation you must fill body site. However, it's not required. So at this stage, I'll see if anyone wants to move that.
Yes, I'm happy to move that. Like populate if known, noting it's optional. So if it's not available in the system, it shouldn't be supplied. Which fits with the obligation of populate if known. So that makes sense to me. So I'm happy to motion.
I'll second.
So Stuart, yeah.
Okay. Should be a poll coming up on your screen.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I think it's busted. We're going to have to use hands, unfortunately.
Old school.
Old school. If you would like to vote in the affirmative that body site should be populate if known, please raise your hand. Fantastic. I'm going to close that off in 3, 2, 1. And we reached a peak of 37 in that. You can lower your hands. Thanks very much. A couple more hands still to go down. If you would like to vote negative, please raise a hand. Currently seeing 3 hands raised for negative.
They're the same hands that were raised for positive, though.
Angus and Kathleen.
Okay.
Cool.
And no negatives. All right, that one is passed. 37 for, remainder abstaining.
Cool.
Thanks.
Excellent. So on the filler side, body site will be made available to the fillers. So as per, so our choices here really were to handle the content and or no error. So the I think the appropriate thing is to handle this content. So basically, if it's populated, body site's populated, it shall not be ignored, and consequences are to be considered when processing. So this means really it's up to the filler themselves to meaningfully understand what they're doing with this element. So really, you may choose to ignore it, but you should be considering the consequences of ignoring it. So there's an expectation, I think, here that this would be a relatively important part of servicing any request. So I think the intent here would to make this shell handle for this particular element. Would anyone care?
Where's the minimum?
I'll entertain a motion. Yeah.
As a minimum, I'll put it in clinical notes.
Yep. You've considered it at that point and done something. Yeah.
I'll motion for that proposal.
Thank you, Michael. You seconder?
I'll second again. That's fine.
Thanks,
Okay,
Stuart.
motion by Michael, seconded by Stuart. If you would like to vote for the motion that body site obligation is handle for the filler, please raise your hand. Okay, we're going to close that one off. 3, 2, 1. That peaked at 33.4. 33 of 52.4. If you would like to vote, hang on, we'll wait a moment. Sorry, let everyone put their hands down. Otherwise, I'll confuse it again. Talwinder, Jessica, your hands are still raised. Thank you. All right, if you would like to vote negative for handle for the filler on body site, please raise your hand. Oh, that's none against, and that one is passed. Thank you.
All right, so let's move on. Great. So now we're into the server obligations. This is really as part of the server actor role. There's a need to accept incoming requests. So when data is supplied to the server, I think the position we have on this would be to, so particularly like this would be when a request is submitted by a placer to the server, is that the server shall handle all of the must support elements. So rather than going through and listing them all, it's all the must support elements that exist. So everything we've talked about so far. There's an expectation that a server would handle those. So pretty much the server would need to consider that content and the ability, to either store or use it however they choose to do so. So yeah, that's pretty much that, Danielle.
I think that's one of the questions I wanted to ask there. So based on our description of the server actor, which I don't know if we have a previous slide before that we can just go back to what we think the server actor does. Do we have the description there? If not, we can
read
at
it.
the eRequesting IG, which has that defined.
Thanks, Michael.
Which is Michael's popped that in the chat. So if we can just go there and talk about it. So it's a system that accepts diagnostic requests and it makes them accessible. And I'm interested to note, I guess, that what we're saying is handle, and we're choosing at this time not to say that expects persistence, I guess. So we're not expecting it to be persisting. We're saying that all the elements or of what we've tagged as needing to be supported in eRequest need to be considered by the implementation of the server, and to make a decision about how it addresses it, whether it ignores it, whether it persists it, whether it does something else with it. We're leaving that wholly up to the server. I mean, that does seem very safe as an initial perspective. I think we probably want to end up going further than that, noting that handle means you could choose to go, yeah, I don't care about that element.
I think there's a little bit of ground to play out in terms of different applications in server roles, and I think we'll probably come back to this at some point. But yeah, this is pretty much like a generic position to say you'll handle everything, and yeah, but that it doesn't really put any major constraints on how you handle it. So yeah.
And can I just confirm that some of the more specific actions like persist or so forth, are they children of handle in terms of the obligations like coding system, or are they additional? Do we?
That is a good question. I need to look up. So I'm just making sure I'm in the right version.
I also see that Roma has
Michael's got
their hand up.
Yeah, mostly in response to you. I think the handle there is quite sensible because a server might be a proxy and still have all the functional appear as a real server, but actually have no internal anything of itself. And in that case, it will handle, as in it will actually ignore most of the data and maybe route a request based on one or two fields. And so obligations like persistence and stuff would be well over the top, but this light description would allow that server to be transparently put in and removed.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
a
I'm
question from the chat. Sanjeet asked, is a placer a server in this case then?
No.
No.
I mean, these are roles, so you might be a placer system and also implement the server role if you want to, right? And so this is not essentially a business role. It's possible that you might want to be a server as well. So basically it's separating those ideas. So the placer is formally just a client. So it's a system that can raise requests and submit them somewhere. So I think technically no is the answer.
The reason I got confused is because if you go back to the IG that was shared, last point especially, Daniel, that you mentioned, right? The link that you have shared, Michael, in that one. So do you mind switching back to the previous tab? Yeah.
Which tab?
The obligations to the link that I provided. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, the actor definition, was it?
Yeah, bottom. Yeah. Server is a system that accepts diagnostic service requests and makes diagnostic service requests accessible. Okay, accept. It does not make diagnostic service requests. Okay.
Yeah, and this is very much from a data exchange perspective. So as a server it can accept receiving that data. Yeah. I'm trying to avoid the word receiving. It triggers people badly. But when it can accept the content, as the data that's sent to it. Yeah, so this is a very much a very generic version of the server. So pretty much you're expected to handle everything that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think it gives us the opportunity to introduce business rules and that later under this to qualify what handle is. At the moment, we're saying we know we have to handle it. We don't have all the business rules and the like, but we can introduce them over time.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in people that are in, I think from a generic fire server perspective, this is pretty straightforward because it's what fire servers do. But I think when you talk about facades and things like that, I think we could probably get some feedback from people that, this might be too much, it might be, there might be some nuance there. So I think it would be good to have this as a starting point.
Can I ask, is when it says these elements, does that mean the must support elements?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So I haven't listed them all, but it's all of the must supports.
I'm
Right.
happy to motion this proposal.
I'd second it, Michael Osborne.
Thank you. Michael Wilson has motioned. Michael Osborne has seconded. If you would like to vote for the motion that all must support elements must be handled as an obligation for the eRequesting server, please raise your hand. Right, we'll close that one off in 3, 2, 1. And that one is passed 35 of 54. If you would like to motion in the negative, just waiting for the hands to go down. Everybody's hand down. Right, if you'd like to vote in the negative for that one, please raise your hand now. Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Great. We can move on then. So this is the other half of the server obligations. This is the making requests accessible. So in this case, we'd expect the server to be able to provide these requests and the elements that are there being supplied in that service request. We again are covering all of the must support elements, and we would expect servers to be able to populate all of those elements. So this shows some intent that servers would be able to populate every must support at some point in their interactions. So optional things obviously may not be there, but it should be demonstrable that the system, the server can actually populate every element that's must support at some stage. So again, this is a very generic requirement. And also probably is a starting point in terms of maybe there's some nuance in there too that needs to be considered, but this is a general fully featured server that is able to populate all of the must supports. I might just leave it at that.
Yep, definitely happy to motion that. I think that is the correct definition of server based on what we've determined in our previous decisions.
Would like to second?
I'll second.
Too late.
That's that close.
Okay, so Danielle has motioned that the eRequesting server must support elements are all shall able to populate. If you would like to vote in the affirmative for that, please raise your hand now. All right, we're going to close that one off in 3, 2, 1. And all right, if everyone can put their hands down, that was 37-4. All right, if you would like to vote negative for that proposal, please raise your hand. And that one is passed 37-4, remainder abstaining.
Awesome. So that's server done. Thanks. And we're just moving on to our last identified actor, a patient access actor. Now this is a client role. So pretty much we'll be receiving the service request content. And so with this, there's at the moment, this is a very low level of requirement. A no error, shall no error is basically saying if a valid service request is received by the patient access actor, the client shall not error. so it's so very much it's meaning on the data side. It means that if valid data is sent to you, there's an expectation that the client will not have a problem with that, and there will be an error. And it's up to the client to decide whether to handle or ignore the content or what to do with the content at that stage. So there's no further obligation other than being able to receive it. And Danielle.
I completely agree. This is our base position. So we've just agreed that for all our must support elements, a server must be able to populate these. So from an application that is serving patient access or a representative of a patient, right? They're going to be receiving these things, and we expect them not to fall over because we're expecting that all of these values we've just tagged as must support are meaningful, right? So that's the no error. And that's our baseline, is we're saying that any actor that is intended to provide patient access or a representative of a patient to that service request has to, when it gets a appropriately formed request, to not error. I absolutely agree that's the default position. I'm interested, though, if we can go further, because again, that just says, is it display? We don't say anything about that. We don't say anything further about the rules. We say whatever the rules for that application, that app that they've defined, they can go do. And so while I realize I'm sort of extending the scope here, I will absolutely vote yes to the no error as our beginning position. I am interested to hear from the rest of the technical design group if there are aspects of this that we think we could go further on than just no error. Andy.
See Andy Bond. Yep.
No.
Well, there you go. There's an answer anyway.
I don't think so, because I worry that we at this point don't want to shoehorn patient access into a predefined kind of role. I think we want to, we don't have a lot of experience at building out the patient kind of pathway, and I believe that patient access is potentially a very broad category of use cases that isn't just around a patient having a visual kind of interface to the service and to the requests. So I think we also need to allow for agents acting on behalf of a patient, consolidation services, all sorts of things that are acting on behalf of a patient, which I think should be able to be relatively broad until we have some experience to show that there are specific example kind of patterns that emerge from those opportunities.
Thanks, Andy. Janie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there should be no obligation that the patient has to take up the request. So that's always got to be open.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Thanks, Janie.
Got
Sanjeev?
Sanjeev? Yeah.
So maybe I'm a bit confused here, just thinking out loud. So suppose a places a request, right? And it's a webhook. Now that webhook, if it is a bundle, it already satisfies this obligation, right? Then do we need something separate to handle it? Am
Yeah,
I
because I think in the patient access role, we're talking about essentially patient-oriented activity. So I think it would be, this is very open, and there's a consideration here that you might receive any or all of the content. Since it's not a specific kind of patient use, this is kind of the default position where all the elements may be there. There's no expectation on how you use them. This might also not be visual. That was one, I think, point Andy made during our sort of pre-meeting discussions, was this might be some kind of patient application agent that is doing other things or consuming the information for other reasons. So this is a pretty generic and simple. This is simple to meet in the sense that you will receive the data and there's no expectation on how you'll use it. So and this again is only if you're in the patient access role. So this is really patient oriented sort of activity, either an agent or an application or some other usage.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Sajid?
Yeah, so would consent sit somewhere prior to this activity?
I think there's probably a framework of authorization and things around this, in terms of what is made available to any particular client application, and also whether that is made available at all is probably another thing which might be tied to consent kind of things as well. So if your agent happens to be an SMS agent, then you might have your patient not consenting to SMS messages, right? And that might be a reason that the patient access isn't granted. So this doesn't address any of that. So this is really just about when data is shared, what can you expect the agent to do with it? So I'd say you can overlay those ideas, in terms of that, but we're not really addressing that directly.
Yep.
Cool.
Adrian?
Adrian, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, a scope sort of size for R1. I mean, this seems to go a bit beyond what we look at for the I guess basic functionality. So is it intended for R1 or further along the track, or is it?
No, this is R1 that we're deciding on now.
Yeah. Okay.
Which bits are in R1 and which bits are later. So we're currently making, or I guess the proposal when someone motions it, is that if an application that is serving patient access of a request gets a service request with these elements that conform to the eRequesting IG, they don't fall over. And they process it according to their own logic.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
and that's the decision.
And there's no requirement. There's no requirement to implement this role, right? So it's only if you have this role in scope in terms of what you want to identify as in terms of a system role. This is a framework where you can say, "Oh, I am a patient access actor, therefore I will follow these rules." And so it really doesn't probably stop other things happening in the ecosystem, but again, this is about having some standardization around these ideas. So
sure.
So I think there's definitely this might run to be a patient portal, or it might be like a third party receiving EHR, or it might be a SMS system providing tokens to gain access to records, and these are all kind of things that might be a patient access tool, and that's why it's very open in some ways, because it's pretty broad and open, and I think we'll probably get maybe more detail as we go, but again, this is probably a good starting point. Michael,
I just want to confirm that the intent here is that it's all must support elements.
Yes.
And I'd just suggest that we change the proposal to say all must support, in case we've missed something here that's got a must support on it.
Thank you. That seems wise. Yeah. So there was no intent to miss anything. Angus.
Just to play devil advocate,
So
it's not our role to dictate how to render a request. So if someone is patient role and they stupidly showed requests without the patient name at the top, it's not our place to manage that risk. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Because basically, at the moment we're not even requiring handling. We're just saying you have to be able to receive the data. So yeah, I think this is a good discussion to have, in the sense that how much obligation do you want to put on these clients? But I think that's a question probably for everyone going forward, is to say, do we want to ask more, or are there specific uses that we want to have the requirements of those described here, because this is really very open, in the sense that, like, the patient access actor just says it'll be able to receive the service request. It doesn't really say what it's going to do with it or anything with it, right? So at the moment, this is probably makes sense, in the sense that there's no real downstream processing or display requirement attached to that actor. So I think, though, it does also, it is a starting point. I think this is really the minimal thing we can do that makes sense. That still says you are looking at our must supports in a meaningful way, because it just means that a valid thing will be accepted, basically.
Thank you for that discussion. I'm happy to propose the motion that we have for the actor that is e-requesting patient access, that we apply the obligation of no error on all must support elements.
And I'm happy to second it.
Right. So Danielle has motioned. Joni has seconded. If you would like to vote for that motion, please raise your hand now. We'll close that one off in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so there were 32 for. If you could all please lower your hands. Right, if you would like to vote negative for that motion, please raise your hand now. Very good, that one is passed. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Cool. So that's it for obligations. So we're moving on to interactions. So we actually kind of injected this just to really clarify the actors have these words like accepts, retrieves, things like that, which are actions, that are happening between clients and servers. So here we're trying to really put this in terms of the FHIR REST API. Basically clients initiate REST interactions, servers respond to those REST interactions. And so the things we talk about at the resource type level. So when we talk about the service request resource type, typical things you would do on the FHIR REST API would be create, read, update, delete, and search. There are other things, but I think the initial kind of things are covered there. And there is a place, I think, to talk about system level, which is where you're not talking about a particular resource type, but you're talking about essentially in FHIR terms, a bundle of resources. So you might have a patient and a requester practitioner and a service request all together in a bundle. And so there's might be some need to be able to submit those in as a bundle. Angus.
No, I'm not going to talk about transactions. I was going to ask about notifications. Have we considered notifications?
I think at this stage, we're going to stick to the basic RESTful API. There are mechanisms in Fire to add publish subscribe patterns and notification patterns as well with servers. But I think at the moment we're kind of leaving that not known. So we're talking about essentially clients calling servers to do the business. However, having said that, if people are interested in expanding what we're talking about here, that is something I think that would be well worth talking about, and maybe at connectathons and things, that would be a really good breakout session to think about how that happens. So really, that is something like can a server do a push, out to other systems? Yep. So I think in reality that would be something that would probably be happening already with some systems. So it's so I think as well, whether we want to consider standardizing around some of that, that's a thought. But I think initially we're not talking about that. So we're talking about clients calling servers at the moment. You happy with that, Angus?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to get there, but not complicate things now. I agree.
Yeah, I think too that the lowest bar is that you have to request to a server, right? The notifications is then the next step, right? You have to support the RESTful interactions, because even with a notification, you're still going to have to go get it. So we're going to start with there, but yeah, it's definitely something we need to look at in the future.
Cool. So we might move on. We'll just go back to our diagram just to see what's happening there. So we have these clients and servers, and already on this diagram we had indicated some of those interactions: create, update, read, search, right? So I think this is really confirming that in terms of exactly the scope and just something around search in detail. So I might move on to the next one. So starting with the server, there's a proposal here, and this is very much related to the obligations that we've talked about these are as consumer related to the consumer obligations. So pretty much there's an expectation that the server will be receiving some of these things. So to be explicit, we're saying a server shall be able to create, accept a create call. So really that's when somebody's supplying a service request, they can supply it as a creation of that service request on the server, and also an update if they need to update that at some point in the future. Danielle?
I just want to query, not because I disagree with this, and I don't. So on how we went through and discussed the actors, we discussed what all essentially, I guess, the clients do. So the placer is a client, the filler is a client, the patient access is a client, and we ended with the server. And that led us to be really clear on, based on what all those clients do, what the obligations are on the server, right? It needs to support all of those things because all the clients do. So when we're starting the interactions discussion, could you just give a brief context for why we're starting with the server? And then I assume we're going to go back out to the client then? Like, why?
I think what you said is exactly right. So this is essentially the consequence of all the clients using the server, and it also aligns with the first sentence of the actor description. So basically accepts service requests, and this is how we're accepting service requests. So we're not really identifying a client that would do this, although there is only one at this stage. But we expect the server will need to do this to service that part of the actor definition anyway. Angus.
So with that definition you both just talked about, then why is read not here for someone has to read them out?
It will be on the next slide.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just talking about the
Could you-
it's yeah.
Well, could you maybe, if the next slide is also the e-requesting server, just
Yeah, it is.
socialize that for
Yeah,
us
yeah.
initially? Okay.
Exactly. Although I've missed read, so you might come back to me on that one. But yeah, this is the intent, was to support the accessibility part as well. So oh, actually, yeah, read's a good discussion. I think we decided to leave it off. But let's have that discussion. Yeah. So what's listed here is search, which is a way that the servers are making those service requests available. So it's it's the ability to get and retrieve service requests from the server. Yeah, the search, there's probably some discussion, but this is really like a minimal kind of concept in terms of getting what we need. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Can I just confirm, I guess, the scope of interactions proposed for the server, therefore, are 3: create, update, and search?
Yes, and I would entertain discussing read, although we have not got that on the slide.
Okay, which matches the diagram in the 2 slides before about we've got create, update, and expecting also the server, therefore, I guess, sorry, I'm just putting this in my head. So the server needs to be able to support, based on this diagram, all the things the clients are asking for. So it needs to be able to support create and update, and it needs to be able to support read and search.
Yep.
Which, that makes sense to me. That's what we've been talking about with the obligations. Okay.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, really this is essentially the first sentence of the server definition is accept service requests, and this is how we're saying it's accepting them. So we need to create them initially and also be able to maintain them, as well. And then onto the making them accessible part, which is serviced by search. So there's obviously detail in that in terms of what you can and can't do. But yeah, so this is an initial position, I think, to start with. So maybe just on the create update slide. So would anyone have a problem with this? So there's an expectation. Effectively, this is really to help the placer be able to create and update service requests. So if everyone was happy that this made sense, I think this is pretty much proposed to accept this.
Yep, happy to move that, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Oh, Daniel, you want to say something?
Just with regard to delete, is that also something we need to consider? I know I know there's opinions around that, but I'm just wanting to raise it rather than just ignoring it.
I was planning to ignore it till later. I think we should have that discussion, but maybe I could do that if I don't run out of time, would be my intent. So this is something I think we can agree on.
So
I think
you're suggesting that we consider delete as an add-on rather than as part of this proposal, deciding it now. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I think we should consider that, because there's other ways to
there are indeed
stop requests, and there's also maybe other obligations that are kind of there as well in terms of GDPR and other things that may come into play if people are considering that stuff, right? So it's so I think that's probably a discussion in itself, and I actually think that might be a good thing to do at the working group, face to face or a connectathon, after the drafts up. Ken,
I just wanted to confirm we're talking about the placer. That's the original placer. You can't have, because the server will handle multiple places, but we're talking about the original placer.
And I guess that again, this is not so much saying who, like there is an original placer that would create the thing, but I guess there's authorization questions about who is allowed to update. that request. And if we haven't really indicated any of that stuff here in terms of, if you think only the original places should be able to update the request, then that's the rules you can apply on your server. If you have some other model, we haven't really said anything about that. So so I think at this stage we're really just saying these are the interactions, and we haven't put any other rules around it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Baptiste.
Sorry, one quick question about the ownership. When the clients search and retrieve the request, is there a mention of the ownership at that point in time that they are going to process it?
I think we will talk about some of that later.
Okay.
Yeah, because like I think there is an intent to. The requests themselves are essentially authorizations to do things, in some way, or some, a request to do something. The actual fulfillment part of the story, I think, needs more content. Angus would love to get there to do task and other things, which are kind of related resources, which would indicate that there's an expectation of a fulfillment to happen. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Angus, for not helping. So did we have someone move this already? No,
we did. Yes,
we did. Thank you. Start the voting.
We do need a second.
Oh, that would be good.
I'll second it.
Thank you,
Angus. All right. If you would like to support the proposal that a server should, at minimum, support shall create and shall update, please raise your hand. All right, we'll close that one off in 3, 2, 1. Thank you. You can lower your hands. That was 39 of 54 for. And if you would like to vote negative, please raise your hand now. That's no negative votes. Everyone else has abstained. Thank you, Brett.
We'll go on. Thank you. So yeah, I will talk about read, but we kind of identified that search was an important concept in terms of things that we definitely needed to support. So so there's so just to break this down a bit, this gives clients the ability to essentially locate and retrieve service requests based on some criteria. And the things we wanted to highlight specifically were, now this is the _ID parameter, which is really just the resource identity in a server. So it's essentially the server identity for the service request. So that's just a standard FHIR ID. So that essentially lets you retrieve a single service request. Danielle.
Sorry, I just wanted to, and I don't disagree with anything you're doing, but just for some context for people to differentiate between what it means to use ID versus _ID. And it means different things in the FHIR space, and they're both really valuable. And I thought that was worth it for this group, because it's, I mean, until you really get into things in the low level, you might not already be aware of what those differences are.
So just the resource ID concept? Yeah.
Which is more the read. So,
yeah.
when we're, because as you highlighted, okay, so doing half of the thing. So when we're talking about read and search, so when you use ID, and when we're talking about search parameters, it's worth noting that in a search parameter sense, none of those things are the same thing exactly as the element in the resource. So even if there's a search parameter called requisition or a search parameter called ID, they are not the thing that like resource ID or resource requisition. For all the search parameters, which is part of the FHIR specification that does search, it defines search parameters and they have their own data types. So it's a bit of a gotcha where people might not know, where they think it's, oh, I know what this is, I know how it works, but it might like catch you unawares. And so for ID, in which we're talking like resource.id, which is specific to a server, that's how you do read. And when you're calling a particular thing, like for service request.id, like a get, that will give you one thing, basically. Like if you've matched it, it will give you one thing. But when you're doing a search, you will often use something like _ID, which is really, really useful in a search perspective. And _ID starts to take you into search space and allows you to start to chain on different things. So you can start to, well, I guess one of the differences between, and I'm leaping ahead there, is a search for a particular thing, be it patient ID equals this or service request ID equals this. It's looking for exactly that thing. It'll give it back to you or it won't. _ID is when you're actually starting to chain out some search things and you can add parameters to that. And so you can start, if you started with patient, for example, you could start with, and that's not part of this request, but I'm more explaining how _ID might work in a more comprehensive ecosystem. You can start using a particular thing called rev_include, in which you can start trying to find related FHIR resources. And you use _ID to say, for this patient resource, and I know the ID, I want to rev_include and then find all the service requests. You can't just do that with ID because that's just read. You need _ID to start that and say, and include all the service requests. So in this case, why we've got shall _ID here is to allow for some more complex searching that allows you to _ID and then start to say, and we want you to include those things. You might remember that we've put must support on things like coverage for insurance. We've included things like patients and practitioner roles and all those things. So you might start with a single resource, and in order to get everything else, you start with _ID to say, starting from this resource, please give me all of these other things back. And that's an _ID search. Please add anything to what I've just said, Brett, Angus, Andy.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. That, like, whilst you say, why would you just search by the ID? I know there's only one. I'm going to get one thing in the result. Once you start to do includes and reverse includes in that, it lets you bring through all the other content. So, a classic thing would get me this particular service request, and include the patient and include the requester. And so you'll get a response that has the service request, the patient, and the requester all in the response set. And you're well on the way to having your full service request definition right now that you need to actually action. Michael.
Oh yeah, on that then, so you've got there that the _ID, that it allows included resources, but would we want some obligations on that to exactly like you said, the patient, the requester, to actually have them as include?
I think we will, but I think we were just going to put this here and then maybe explore that down the track. So we're trying to get to this is like the most minimal thing we could kind of come up with.
Well, I would really argue that not being able to get the patient through it would be the minimum as well. But
well, it creates other problems because there's questions about how do you get the patient, because we haven't said anything about that. Yeah. But it's so it's I would take that as a good point. But I'm not sure we were prepared to go into all of the relationships.
I'd be interested if anyone else has any thoughts on whether we should take that extra step. or not, or just leave it for later?
It's probably a good proposal to put forwards into the draft without the patient. I'm
Yeah,
not convinced that the patient is required to make the system work. The data,
I mean, you can get it through a second request. It's just about whether, like, you can always then do a second request to get the patient. So it's just whether you get it in one request using a search, using the ID and chaining it.
You can potentially get it off the patient while they're standing in front of you as well. So, I'm just saying, I don't think it's required to make it work. It's probably very beneficial, however.
I don't know if that's clinically safe to just get it from the patient for the order that you've brought up.
I'm not sure how much we can rely on these repositories for patient data. These repositories can be order repository, but might not have a patient merging or accommodation of patient system in this in their software. So you can just go and ask for order based on the order number, and that's the only information that you're looking for.
Look, I don't think we, in the end, can get away with you don't retrieve a patient demographic for a request, right? Like if you're going to bring up a request on a screen to service that patient, stick a needle in their arm, you have to confirm that this request they've given you actually is for them and not their sister or their brother or their mother. And so
it's a patient identification.
It's inevitable you have to have the patient identification that is in the patient resource. Whether we're going to define it today to say, you can include the patient, I'm open with maybe we don't. But I think inevitably, you're going to have to pull back the patient when you pull back a request if you're going to do something with that request.
Cool. Thanks. Jane, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think what Talwinder was saying isn't that we wouldn't have the patient, that there will be a patient that's part of the service request and that information demographics can be displayed at that time. But what we're saying is that we may not have a patient individual record within our server that we can go and say, give me all the service requests for a certain patient, because we're an order repository, not a patient repository.
No, but you might be able to say, give me all the service requests where the patient .identifier is this IHI, which achieves the same.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, just to cover off what's here, we have got. Well, it says shall accept at least one parameter. What's this? That's actually essentially a shall not allow no parameters is probably what we're saying there. So when you do a search just on a resource type without any parameters, that has an implication that you're going to return all of the content of that service type. So essentially, that's a proposal to rule that out as something we definitely don't want to happen. So that, although there might be cases people might disagree with that, but that's what that first point's saying under the search there. Shell _ID is be able to retrieve a specific service request by the essentially the service request.id value, which is the resource ID that the server maintains, and we've added shall support the requisition search, which is was one of the things. It's a mandatory field in our model, and is our group identifier for things. So that would actually allow you to search for a group. So if you had a set of requests in a group, that would let you search, and you'll get the set of requests returned to you in the response. So that's the coverage so far. We haven't said any specific things around the include concept, being able to include related resources like patient requester. So yeah, this was pretty much the minimal. Angus.
So this second dot point shall accept at least one parameter, unable to query all. Our intent is that you shall use one of the two below it, right? Like because because these are the only ones available. Like you can say unable to shall accept at least one parameter when the scope is only those two parameters below it. But as soon as I add patient in or status in, it actually shall accept at least the underscore ID or requisition parameter is the minimum.
Yeah, good point. Danielle, did you want to say something?
I have to admit, from a standards perspective, I agree with Angus.
Yeah.
In which I need to ask what you're expecting from that first bullet point. So that's, I know we've gone shall accept at least one parameter, but what does that actually look like in the standard? I guess actually.
Yeah,
Let me
it ends up being a
rephrase.
shall not, wouldn't it?
Usually in standards, we prescribe what the minimum requirements are and we're silent on everything else. And I guess the first bullet point sounds like a thing that some systems could do if they absolutely want to. We don't care. It's not our business if they choose to support that. And so I'm not sure why we're...
I think that is a very good point. I think it's a very good point. So friendly amendment, let's delete that point.
Okay. Good. No, I'm happy with that. That makes it clearer for me. If we're quiet on if systems choose to
I think you're right.
offer that or not, that's their business. Good for them.
Yeah,
we don't care.
I think we want to say what you shall do rather than what you shouldn't do. I think that's actually probably a good premise in general for doing standards, but it's also, I think, could cause problems because people might want to do that in their scenario. By ruling it out, it means that effectively they couldn't be conforming to that statement.
You could still circumvent it with requisition because you could say where requisition.system is.
But the problem, therefore, and that impacts systems is depending on your use case, you might actually want to go, what are all the service requests in my system? And while that's not our use case for eRequesting, and I don't think we'll ever support it, I don't think it needs to be a conformance requirement for us to say you shall not ever, under any circumstances, allow you to do it. That's crazy talk. We just want to set the minimums in order to support what we need.
So let's do that. Chris, I'm very happy to delete that shall accept at least one parameter point entirely.
And its children?
No. Just the top one. Yeah.
I think the children become first-class citizens.
Yeah, they become first-class citizens. Yeah, cool. So now really we're saying shall support two different kind of searches, one by underscore ID and one by requisition. And that's all we're asking you have to support.
And we are, so are we saying we are allowing the server to return many? We are.
Yes.
Yep. We are.
Yep.
Yeah.
We would have to, yes, based on that search set of requirements. May I query why we don't have patient as a shall search parameter?
There's nothing in the actor definitions to say you need to do that.
Patient access, actor. Surely that implicitly provides the scope of a specific patient.
Not if they have the requisition ID in their hand.
Yeah. I would like them to shall support it, as in be able to service a request that comes to them that says for this patient. But if that's not widely accepted by the group, I'll take that. But I really think it should be considered.
Yep. I think that's a fair point. We did discuss it as well. Angus.
I'm falling down my own rabbit hole now. So, I think there's another discussion about authorization, like because now, and I've only just thought of this on the fly, I could, as Sonic, go and request all the requests from the server with this system, and go and find all my competitors' orders, just because I like doing that.
But I think this
not
is
necessarily
authorization
according
again.
to this. This is
Yeah.
underscore
I think
ID and
that's an authorized.
requisition.
Well, I think that's an authorization problem question, isn't it? Not
Yeah, that's not catered by this particular slide. That's not what this is about.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Andy,
I think we have to just be aware that this is only a stepping stone to where we're going. It's not the destination. So when we talk about, when you, Angus, you say picking up your competitors' orders, the whole thing here is it's a specification of a service to be performed, not who's going to perform it. So in this instance, it is not anyone's, it's no one's, it's just an order. It's a request, a set of related requests. The whole nature of which organization or which filler is an appropriate party to pick it up is actually outside of this scope at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like the same, there is a question that comes up. I didn't want to go here today, but it's where things like AU Core start to overlap in terms of usage with things like this server requirement. So it, in some ways, if you are maintaining a request and you're servicing a AU Core requester query, you're just becoming an AU Core responder. And if service request was one of the things AU Core did, I kind of start to say we're now moving to more into a general purpose HR model, in terms of things you might do, right? So it's a good question, right? In terms of like what level of detail. It's also like in the use cases for this, there's nothing that says you have to be able to access by a patient identity anywhere, right? So it says things about tokens, and being able to do that. So, and essentially this is kind of approaching, that maybe this is related to tokens, but again, like if everybody wants to have that as a requirement, we could add patient as being one of the things. But that means if you're going to fill this role, you'd have to be able to support search by patient, right? Or we put a lesser requirement like should. Andy, did you want to comment again? Or you just got your hand up?
Well, I did forget to put it down, but I was thinking I do have another comment. My concern is if we go down this path with patient, then we would then, I think, need to go and reconsider the placer and filler and how they might wish to constrain the kinds of service requests that they're seeking as well. And then that kind of, I think, just bites off a whole bunch of complexity.
So I maybe withdraw that. I agree it's slightly more complex, in which the server will likely shall a bunch, in which some of the actors would shall and some of them would should. And that's maybe not clear from this one. So let's maybe just go with what's here, because I don't disagree with it and I was looking to add on, but I realize we've got a timeline.
Yeah, it starts to overlay different use cases, right, into the story, and it's hard because then we'll just be expanding out, right? Because we'll start to say patient, I need to be able to, restrict it by different parameters.
So could we just do a noting? I realize we've got the 5th of August deadline, so let's do the hermeneutic circle or whatever. We're starting at service request. We're starting at the kernel, right? That's fine. Let's agree on that. We'll go through the clients and then we need to cycle back to the server, because anything that's a shell on a client at all has to be shell back on the server. So if we ever agree on anything additional, even if it should or not agreed on the other clients, which is no problem, the server needs to support it. So we'll start here. I'm happy to motion that if no one else is, and then we go around that circle again and end back on the server, please.
That'd be awesome. Cool. Angus, last comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm happy with this because I think this is just a beginning point, right? We're enabling that you can go get the request by the barcode, the requisition, and its ID, and we acknowledge that there's a whole lot of learnings to become about everything else. I accept that I'm probably going to want the patient and the practitioner and all that, but I also know that I'm going to come at it from task, not even service request. So there's all this complexity about how do you get that. And I think this is just our infantile baby step where you can at least get it by its ID and its requisition. And we're going to learn over time all the other ways that people are going to want it.
Nice. So do I hear you moving this? Oh, Danielle already did that.
A second, Danielle.
Okay, yes, no, that's happy. I'm happy to move this. This makes sense to me as the initial position for the eRequesting server.
Right. So the motion is that the eRequesting server shall search and shall support the _ID and shall support the requisition. If you would like to vote in the affirmative, please raise your hand now. Okay, and I'm going to bring that to a close in 3, 2, 1, and that is 32 of 47 for. Please lower your hands. And if you would like to vote negative for that proposal, please do so now. There is currently 1 negative. Okay, so that is 1 negative. Adrian, did you raise your hand for negative? I thought you had it up for affirmative as well.
Oh,
nope,
my mistake. Sorry. Yes, yeah, it was affirmative. Yeah. Yep.
All right, so there are no negatives. No negatives for that one. All right.
So much nicer when there's no negatives.
Double clicked on that one. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We've got 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, that's good.
Chris, on that, I just need a couple of minutes at the end to go through the eRequesting DI. So can we just, do we have time to get through one more or?
Yeah, if we are really nice, we might get through everything. Let's try. So so clients are really just a reflection of what we've agreed to already now in the server. Okay, so we have the placer who's going to use create and update. So we say the placer shall support create and update. I would like to move that we accept that.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mike.
That was nice and quick. All right, so the motion is that the placer supports create and update with shall. Please raise your hand if you would like to support that motion. All right, we'll close that one off in 3, 2, 1. And that is 35 of 47 for. Please lower your hands. And if you would like to vote negative for that proposal, please raise your hand now. Once again, no negativity. That one is passed. Thank you.
Cool. From the filler side, so this is about retrieving and getting access to those things. Yep, thank you very much. That would be ideal. So that's just reflecting what we've agreed to on the server. So this is the filler who needs to fulfill that request. It needs to be able to obtain it. So this is how they would obtain it at this stage. Michael.
Just on the placer, if we don't have read, the placer will need potentially the search as well.
It's not in our use case at this point.
If they update, they need to get it to see what it is. It's currently set to.
Yep, there's to update it, you need to have the ID which you've obtained on create
and installed somewhere else. Okay.
Which is not yet agreed, but okay, tidal wave.
Yeah,
we'll come back to that one.
I think we should come back. That's a discussion we did have as well, and like I think that's the fair point. And like if it needs to be, we can add that in. But
yeah, we'll come back.
I was
Let's
thinking
not do
the
it right
same,
now.
and now I agree with Michael because you've got to read it to update it. I was thinking just reading it to view it, but you pretty much have to read it to update it. Otherwise, you stomp someone else's update. But yeah, later.
Yeah, good. We'll come back. Yeah, we'll come back. That's good. Maybe we'll do that next time. Cool. So are people happy with this on the filler side?
No.
What's missing or needed?
Mainly because the fillers are going to be interacting with the task, and the task will give them the reference in theory to the service request. So while concentrating on searching, it kind of misses the inherent relationship, which is not to be able to search.
Do you think, Andy, while I agree, there's no harm in, I can also just read the service request by its ID or its requisition, even though I'm with you, I probably won't, I'll use the task, but that's a task conformance thing when we get there. At a minimum, you'd think that there's
but
lots
then
of
you don't need this.
provide...
And making this mandatory to support belates the fact that the main interaction would be through the task, not actually direct to the service request.
You don't need it. I guess you don't. I'm in my mind, I'm thinking there's many times I've used this to troubleshoot, even if I'm not using it to fulfill.
Debugging is going to become part of the mandatory requirements of service. Then we're going to have to roll back to a whole bunch of other obligations.
Yeah,
Can I just talk about though, directed, undirected? So someone rocks up. You're going to get, we assume, an ID, right? That's the thing you're going to use to find it, which won't be task. That'll go to service request, I presume. So that's the one we want to show, because there won't be a task in existence yet if someone's like rocking up and it's not directed.
Well, there will. There'll be
no.
Yeah.
No.
Yes, there will be a task. There will be a task, and the barcode I scan from the patient will be on the task, and it will lead me to the task, and it's that task I'll be cancelling, and a new task will be created for me.
Yeah,
You won't be searching. Moment, so you're imagining, just hang on, checking for me. At the moment a service request is created, automatically a task is created, independent of whoever is fulfilling it, because it's an undirected request. And then someone walks into a collection center, and what you're actually accessing is the ID to the task, but not the request. That's what we're talking about here?
Correct. That's how I see it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to interject here, guys. I don't believe we're going to resolve this one today, unfortunately.
No. Yeah, I think we'll have to park it and give Michael some kind of chance.
All right, thanks everyone. Okay,
Thank
Michael.
Thanks. Yeah, so I've sent out an email to the TDG today about the proposal for the AU eRequesting data interoperability, mapping to AU eRequesting. Can I just share my screen for a second? I think I might need you to stop sharing or to make me a just put it in the chat anyway. Maybe you can just navigate for me, that's fine. So this is a proposal that has the mappings. So this will actually go in the IG. So there is a placeholder already in the AU eRequesting IG for the mappings from AU eRequesting DI to AU eRequesting. So this is something we want to get in for the ballot for comment, because it shows our traceability back to that AU eRequesting DI. So this is up on a Confluence page. What I'd like you to do is to review it and provide any feedback prior to next Thursday's meeting. You can do that by inline comments or by adding comments at the bottom of the page. I'll just get you to scroll down a bit, Chris. So what this has is it has on the left-hand side here, the AU eRequesting DI data group, the data element, and then where we've mapped it at the moment to the AU eRequesting service request. There's also some comments on the right here about any specific details about that mapping. And anything that's a TBD is something we haven't mapped yet. So we haven't identified what that mapping is. And scrolling down a bit. There's also some comments about how we've mapped it, if we've made specific details about how it's been mapped. And right down the bottom here, we've got some mappings as well to some things that are in AU core. So you'll see there's AU core condition, AU core patient, and the like. So these are all the mappings. This will go in if you look in the IG at the moment. I'll just place that link in the chat as well. That there is actually a placeholder page for this, and it has nothing in it. It's got everything as TBD. It's under guidance. It's under the guidance tab, the top one there. You're requesting data for interoperability. If you scroll down this, so this page placeholder is already here, but everything's TBD. So this proposal is to put the mappings that have been identified here into the IG on that page. So if I can get everyone to go through that, provide any comments in the page, then we'll go through this in the next meeting, the last one before our snapshot's taken for ballot for comment, and hopefully get approval for that to go in. So that's just an action item on everyone for next week. And I'll probably talk here about the upcoming meetings as well. So our last meeting that we've got next week. So we need to finish off those RESTful interactions. So we'll add to that. I want to do a full walkthrough of the IG, which will be able to talk to you what we've got there today and any other outstanding issues that we might have, as well as planning what next. So we don't stop when we go to that ballot for comment. We're going to keep developing the IG. So it's identifying what next.
Thanks, Michael. Yes, so next meeting is 1st of August, and then 5th of August following that, the ballot for comment is released. We will probably cancel the TDG meeting on the 6th. And the reason for that is that that is the week of the HIC event in Brisbane, and a lot of the teams are going to be at that event and unable to run the meeting that week. Which means the next meeting following the 1st will be the 15th of August, where we'll do a ballot explanation and forward planning a meeting. All right, I think that's it. Thanks, everybody. Good productive meeting today. One more meeting to go, and we'll finish everything off then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.